to Issued for Construction. I'm your host, Jonathan Jacobs, and today I've got with me a woman who has been, I would say, a formidable force in the architecture industry in Canada for a number of years. She might not want to say that herself, but I'll say it on her behalf. She was previously on the podcast in a different way, along with a few others, which is where we first met. And today I've got with me Carol Phillips from Moriyama Teshima Architects. And Carol, I have to say thank you for joining.
Absolutely. It's such a pleasure to be here, Jonathan.
So Carol and I, we rescheduled a few different times, and we are now finally getting to sit down. And this is a discussion I wanted to have with you for a while, because now, having got to know you, what was it, almost a year ago, we've been able to communicate and talk and exchange messages here and there and go for dinner. And for those of you unaware, Carol has been practicing for a number of years. Moriyama Teshima is probably one of the most reputable architecture practices in the country. And so it's a pleasure to sit across from you.
Thank you. It's very, very gracious introduction. Thank you, Jonathan.
Before we dive in, a quick word. Later in this episode, Carol and I are going to talk about family, culture, and the deeply rooted memories tied to food and smell, like the magical scent of chocolate in her family's warehouse, or the fusion of Caribbean and Amerindian food. Food and family are the ultimate foundation of the home, which brings me to Kaplan's Appliances. Kaplan's is a true generational institution here in Toronto. They supply what is, without a doubt, the best client service in the city. Whether you're an architect, a designer, a builder, or a homeowner, if your family has lived here for generations, there's a very good chance someone in your family knows exactly what the Kaplan's experience is all about. When you spend that kind of money on a premium appliances, you want it to be so much more than just another transaction. And at Kaplan's, it is. When you book a showroom visit ahead of time with one of their sales reps, you are treated to truly elevated experiences. You get a meal prepared right in front of you by an in-house chef, all while getting a comprehensive education on their incredible product lines. They carry the absolute best. Sub-Zero, Wolf, Miele, Genair, Fisher & Paykel, La Cornue, DCS Outdoor, Urban Bonfire, Lynx, Kalamazoo, and more. It is a completely immersive experience that goes far beyond bright lights and a credit card swipe. If you're a professional in this industry, connect with me. Reach out. It's Jonathan at issuedforconstruction.ca, and I will personally connect you with their team. Take your clients there, have lunch. If you're a homeowner, go there, have lunch, and let them show you what an elevated appliance experience actually looks like. If you don't want to connect with me, well, you can head over to the liner notes and you'll see their website down there. Now, back to Carol. So, Carol, I started everything off always asking everyone about, tell me about where you grew up, where were you born, what was life like for you early on, what were your interests, what kind of kid were you?
Sure.
So that's an open-ended question for you to be able to go ahead and run with.
Yeah. So I was born in Guyana in South America. It's a small country on the northern tip of South America. Its neighbors are Suriname, Venezuela. And the Guyanas, there's French, Dutch, and British Guyana. I'm from British Guyana. Gained its independence, of course, in the 60s. And as did Suriname. I believe French Guyana is still French. These are small countries at the top of what is largely an entire continent that was either Spanish with a little bit of Portuguese in it. And I think that has something to do with them being port cities. And so, other colonizing nations got these three little countries at the tip of South America.
Yeah.
And so the British influence was actually very, very strong in Guyana. The architecture is these. I grew up in what would be called a kind of Demerara style house, wooden building. Guyana's under sea level, and it's one of I think 9 countries that are touched by the Amazon. incredibly rich with flora and fauna. Um, I think Guyana has something like 600 bird species, where all of Canada has 600 bird species. Biodiversity is incredibly impressive.
Yeah.
I grew up going to an Anglican school. It was run by nuns, and then over time, you saw political influences that started to impact the country. At some time in my childhood, the chapel was closed, and the ties to religion were cut. Guyana, being so close to Cuba, and had toyed for many years with a more socialist agenda.
Mm-hmm.
And it's something that I didn't quite understand as a child, but we grew up with privilege, and I didn't understand that.
That's what you grew up with.
I simply didn't understand that sort of social privilege that was afforded to my, particularly my father's family. My mother is of Chinese heritage, and my father is very mixed. But also, I think if you were to simmer it down, there is Spanish, Dutch, British influence in his life. But all along the way, I'm sure that there was a lot of, my dad's family was in South America for a very long time, so there's a lot of different mixed heritage and make me up. I used to say when we moved to Canada that, like, because we have jet planes, everybody's going to be like me eventually. I've never done the sort of genetic test, and I'm sure it would come back with a tremendous amount of complexity. And I think that that's great. And there's a lot of racial diversity in that part of the world.
I was
go ahead.
To ask you, just when you talked about how they removed religion, you had grown up with it, or not? I mean, you say you're in a school with nuns.
Sure.
How did it impact you in any way?
What was interesting is that my family did not actually practice.
Okay.
I think in a way we were educated through that, in that system. St. Gabriel's was the school I went to. And in a way I got that teaching from others, not necessarily from my parents or my family.
Okay.
I think my mom loved literature. She had a very expansive kind of way of thinking. In a way, I think perhaps we ended up at these schools because my mom saw the value, but we didn't necessarily practice as a family. So we grew up with that kind of practice as part of our lives, but not necessarily part of our whole family experience. Right. My parents were big into sports, and they're the big kind of tropical sports. So my dad played cricket and field hockey and
soccer.
Yes, and football.
I was gonna say, did they call it soccer? Or did they call it football?
Football. Yeah. And my family were big into racket sports. We would go as a family and play badminton and squash, and we had a lovely idyllic kind of life. We would spend time going into the creeks in the country and swim in these bauxite-rich creeks that were pretty much in the jungle. These big orange deposits, essentially. I don't know if it was like healthy to do that now that I look back on it.
You're still here.
I'm still here.
And you're still swimming. We'll get there later.
And it was a wonderful, free kind of life. And then at a certain point in history, Guyana as a country had gone through waves of, leadership change. And there were things that I didn't understand as a child, which had to do with a lot of, in a way, racial tension in the country. And I would come to understand the sort of makeup of the country when I returned there as an adult many, many years later. But around the age of 10, before I was 10, things were getting a little challenging. There was a real movement to explore a more socialist agenda. And I don't think that we were not open to that, but certainly it was complicating ourselves as a family, I think, that had the history that we did as well.
Mm-hmm.
And it was time to leave. It was at a time when Canada had a very generous immigration policy, around the same time that a lot of the persecuted Ismailis came from North Africa under Idi Amin. The door was open to arriving in Canada, and a lot of Guyanese families came to Canada at that time.
And when was this? Actually,
It was
more important,
1977.
how old?
So
Okay.
yeah. Yeah, and we got established in Canada and had to start all over. We had to start all over. We brought very, very little with us.
Mhm.
A trailer full of tropical wood furniture that immediately split and cracked when it arrived in Canada, that came over on a sea can, and very little money and very little resources.
What did your father do?
My dad's family had a family business in Guyana, called CA Phillips.
Okay.
And it was a diverse kind of business operation. They owned several different businesses. And one of the businesses they had was a import export and a supermarket in town. And my dad and his cousin Faye pretty much ran that. And I have these memories of once a year being able to go to the warehouse with my dad at near Christmas when the imports were really flowing in, and the door would open, and to me the whole place smelled like chocolate, and I and it was magical. It was really magical. And yeah, it was a very, very beautiful childhood. We spent a lot of time vacationing in places like Barbados, and we had tons of family friends, and riding bikes through the streets, and just a very, very lovely childhood growing up outside. And I think about the architecture of the country as well, being under sea level and being in such a tropical environment and a wood-based environment. I've recently had pause to look back on that in my life, and I know we'll get there, Jonathan, but I have been a huge champion for mass timber construction,
Mm-hmm.
natural ventilation systems,
Mm-hmm.
flood mitigation.
Wonder why?
Well, it's funny because I grew up in a house that was on stilts.
Yeah.
In a country that was under sea level.
Yeah.
I grew up in a wooden house with deep verandas that you could sit out in, even if there was oppressive heat or monsoon level rains, you could still sit out. I grew up in a house that had basically these hopper windows that you could just sort of push out and let the natural ventilation in, but not the heat and the sun. They tilt out. Yeah. And the house had like a double layer of wood louvers in some spaces, and then limited amounts of glass, but just wood louvers that would shed the rain, but allow natural breezes to come through the house. Every roof had
shade while the window was open.
That's right. That's right. And every house as well had a relatively steep pitch to take the rain off. And
so more like an A-frame style, or not quite?
Not A-frame,
quite.
A-frame, but these are again, if you ever look up a Demerara style house in Georgetown, Guyana, you see what I mean. But there's more kind of colonial kind of look, and as well the influence of decoration. So all the wood was. A lot of it was carved and turned into spindles, and there was layers of decoration over what would be like just a simple sort of shiplap board architecture up on concrete block piers, and just the presence of fresh air wafting in through the house all the time. I remember when we moved to Canada, my dad actually putting out trays of salt water near a fan, because he somehow thought if he could get the salt into the air, we would have the same atmosphere that we missed, right? It was pretty interesting.
I was just away and came back,
mm-hmm.
and I was in Florida.
Mm-hmm.
And I just said to my wife yesterday, the difference of breathing.
Yeah.
When I was in Florida, like when I wouldn't have a runny nose, I wouldn't sniff, nothing.
Mm-hmm.
The second that I arrive back here, I'm here for a couple hours and I'm immediately back to like sniffing. And
yeah, it's a really, the moisture in the air is really something that actually, we're water.
Yeah.
And so there's less of a division in a way.
Yeah.
I grew up with an abundance of like beautiful fruits and cuisine that was very, very mixed. So Guyana is on the northern end of South America, but it identifies with the Caribbean. So there is this mixed cuisine as well. So a lot of foods actually have Amerindian influence. A lot of foods have their kind of colonial influence, and a lot of foods are just this mashup that you see in the Caribbean. Indian foods, but have their special curries. Chinese foods that also are not quite like the Chinese that you get in the restaurant here. They have a little bit more heat, a little bit different ingredients because they've been sort of pushed through this adaptation.
Fused.
Yes, fusion before fusion, right? I love Caribbean cuisine. It's very satisfying and welcoming to me. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and for anyone listening, if you don't know this, Toronto's got a pretty amazing variety of both traditional and fusion.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's a melting pot for the eclectic varieties of food
that
exist all over this world.
Yeah.
Later in this episode, Carol talks about her off-the-grid cottage up in Georgian Bay. Imagine you're up there, taking a boat on the water, and all you have to do is look forward and see this beautiful slice of heaven. But it's a curtain wall, a full curtain wall of glass. There's a 90-degree corner at the edge of the cottage. And from inside, you get to see this beautiful tree out of one pane on the side and the sprawling lake out in front. The way the glass just perfectly frames that image, that is exactly the reason why you drive out of the city in the first place, to get that. To capture a view like that, you need the right product, you need the right team, you need the right vision. And that is where The Doors comes in. The Doors is a European window and door supplier providing a truly premium product. While they specialize in high-end aluminum, they provide a full range of materials from fiberglass and vinyl to aluminum wood-clad and steel. They offer minimal profiles in both standard and custom colors. We are talking massive 20-foot spans, whether you need them high or wide. They can do a 90-degree corner wall unit like I described, or 90-degree glass units going right from the wall to the roof, and I've seen that happen. And custom sliders that make your jaw drop. And of course, those breathtaking full curtain walls. If you want to learn more about The Doors, and I highly recommend you do, feel free to reach out to me directly. My email address is Jonathan, that's Jonathan, at issued4construction.ca, or head over to the liner notes, and I'm happy to connect you. I'd love to introduce you to the beautiful husband and wife duo of Martin and Marta, the brilliant minds behind the fantastic operation that is The Doors. But now, back to Carol.
So I immigrated to Canada like at around the age of 10, and when we moved here, we moved to Richmond Hill, which at the time was mostly farmers' fields. But I had an aunt here who was already established here. We landed there, and then eventually ended up in North York when my parents found work and got established. And I would say, to tie these arcs back to architecture as well, I would say that for me, it was a nervous time. I mean, everything was strange and everyone was a stranger. But I will say that going to the Ontario Science Centre was a place where it was a great equalizer in a way.
It had just opened.
It
right? A couple years prior.
It was not that brand new. I don't actually know the date that it opened. It would have been the centennial of Canada.
Yeah.
But basically, you know, to experience that level of play and discovery with other children around
Yeah.
was actually something that was really, really cemented into my experience. I felt.
69.
Yeah.
It opened.
Yeah. So it had been open for almost
It's a
a decade.
shame that I couldn't remember that, because as a part of this also reference with you, is that I interviewed Brian when
Oh, yeah.
had it broke that they were going to shut it down, and I had all this stuff. I can't believe I didn't remember that.
Yeah. Well, so yeah, it was open for almost a decade at that point, but it was a fresh experience.
Yes.
I think, you know, you probably covered this with Brian, but there's something that people don't understand about the Science Center was, as much as the architecture and the idea of reaching deep into the ravine like that, which we don't build like that anymore. We understand the fragility of the ravine, but at the same time, the understanding that science is the study of nature, to make that leap into the ravine was just a stroke of absolute genius.
As a kid, I referenced this, that place is like, it was like tree houses connected by these escalators or stairs. And it was this opportunity to be able to, like, as a kid, when you started, if you go to the bottom,
yeah,
you're at the base of the treehouse and you work your way up.
Did you and Brian ever talk about the treehouse and Raymond?
No.
Oh, that's a whole other podcast.
Oh, okay. All right. So I'll do that with Brian. I'll have Brian back on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The treehouse is what inspired Raymond to be an architect.
Okay.
When he was interned in.
Now I feel like I have to go back and listen.
You have to go through.
I have
this.
To go back and listen to the original interview.
That's interesting that you say that. But
yes.
But what I was going to say about the Science Center is that it was also the introduction of the way we saw science museums. At the time, there was only one other. They're very commonplace now to have interactive exhibits, to learn through play, to do all of that. But at that time, that did not exist. Science museums were like nature museums, where you went and looked at something under glass. You know, maybe even dioramas of stuffed animals and things like that, where you got to understand biology, etc., but under glass, and very night at the museum type of display, or, you know, being explained to by the people who worked there what was happening. But the actual act of self-discovery wasn't really a thing. I think there was one other museum in San Francisco at the time who had adopted that kind of way of interacting with science. And so for the Science Center to have actually introduced not only a remarkable building in a remarkable setting, but to have introduced that level of interaction, engagement was so phenomenally groundbreaking.
So part of my introduction, for those listening, when Carol arrived today, she arrived, my family was still here because the kids they're still on March break. And I introduced my daughters to you, saying, Carol now helps run the practice that designed the Science Center. One of your favorite buildings that you now miss. And you know, these kids, I know I'm still talking about it, but kids love that place.
Yeah,
just love it. So
that was one of my favorite things about growing up in North York.
Being able to experience it.
Yeah. And basically at that time, I was just moving through navigating junior high and high school in North York, and getting my first jobs and my driver's license and all of that.
What was your first job?
Oh, I worked at a bakery, and I was just sort of stunned at the amount of waste. I used to bring home bags and bags and bags of day old muffins. My mom had a chest freezer in the apartment we lived in. I mean, when you immigrate to a place and you have limited means,
of course,
the chest freezer is one of the first things you buy. You can't afford for things to go to waste.
Yes.
But I just remember at a certain point the muffins were taking up too much of the chest freezer. Yeah, but that was I worked. I that was my first job. But yeah. Growing up in North York, and Science Center was actually really a big part of that.
Yeah. And what were the courses that you had interest in when you were in school? And in addition to that, what did you enjoy doing out of school? What were some of the extracurricular activities that you were interested in?
Right. Growing up, oh gosh, we're going way back.
Yeah, I know.
So So
I warned you.
yes, so I was always a kind of a sciencey and literature kid. Back in the day, they used to skip people grades, and I had been skipped 2 grades, which I think is unhealthy. They eventually put me back to just one, so I was always youngest person in the class.
Yeah.
I also they also had something, they call it gifted now,
Yeah.
but at the time they had a kind of enriched stream in the school. So you would do all your core classes with a very small group of people, maybe a handful, 6 or 10 other students in your grade, and you would do English and all of the main core courses together with an enriched teacher.
I remember having.
Did you do that?
We had the same thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then you would go back to the other classes for all the other ones.
Yeah.
So I kind of went to school with a very small group in a way. We were always in the same classes together. We took the main courses together, and then we would kind of separate out. We all had our different interests, and we, like anything in those enriched programs, the people who are kind of forced into there don't necessarily all have the same interests. So I dabbled in a lot of things. I joined the theater group. I joined the Girls Athletic Association. I was very interested in contemporary dance.
What did you do in theater?
Oh, just danced, actually.
Okay,
So
yeah.
I was very interested in contemporary dance.
Okay.
So even taught a little bit as when I was in high school at some of the studios that I
like after school programs?
after school things, and then somehow through that became the president of the Girls Athletic Association, which
You say it like it was an accident.
well, I mean, it was a weird thing. I mean, I guess I was on a couple of teams, volleyball and that, but and gymnastics but I wasn't the stereotype. I was also in the Irish program studying these sort of nerdy books and everything. So it wasn't your typical kind of the Girls Athletic Association former presidents were not quite like me. So anyway, I think I developed a real love of physics at that point too, and it was a real passion of mine.
What was it about physics that just
it was expansive? It was expansive. I was able to sort of piece together the relationship between big ideas about the universe and big ideas in literature. I was able to make those connections, those more philosophical connections that are in me. I understand physics to be rooted in, just more thinking about how do we exist? How does anything exist at the molecular level, but through relationships of forces and where is the universe going? Those kinds of questions really, really would really inspire me in the same way that reading Kafka would. So I would have these things bouncing around in my head, and I actually thought I was just going to go into physics when I went into university. But it was my older sister who told me I should try architecture. She was looking at it like this perspective that you're great at the arts and you're great at math, and she sort of put those two together. As an architect now, I realize that that's not really what architecture is, but when you're thinking about choosing a career, when you're in high school, those are the things that bubble up.
Right.
But I wasn't sure about that. It didn't feel necessarily like my choice or my path. And I did apply to the University of Waterloo, and I did go for an interview. And during the interview, it was Lorenzo Pignati, who still teaches at Waterloo, who was interviewing me, and he said, "Are you sure about this?" And I remember I said, I said no. And he said, "Well," he said, you're great and everything, but we've got 100 other kids out there who are sure." So I went into science and physics anyway. I never really told my mother that story because I think she would have she would have been a little bit disappointed that I sort of blew my first chance at going to Waterloo, but I was not sure.
Right. Well, but
And
isn't that fair?
totally fair, but
Yeah.
for the daughter of immigrants
I
who
was
gave
just
up
gonna say- I
everything
was
to
just gonna
get you
say, I know.
educated, and for you to choose a professional
Yeah.
program and to say something like that at your chance is probably not something you want to go home and tell mom and dad.
Thanks for giving us a better life. By the way, I'm not sure what I want to do. So I might have blown my chance of going to the architecture school of Waterloo. What?
Yeah.
What did you say, Carol?
I think you get that. But my sister was right. I went into the science program at the University of Waterloo, intending to follow a pathway towards physics.
Mm-hmm.
And I was also interested in taking a literature course. And I was...
So I wanted to pursue that, even with physics.
Yeah, I thought maybe I'm just going to do that as an elective. And I remember looking through all of the choices, and I didn't see anything I loved. And I had a family member of a high school friend, actually a high school boyfriend. His cousin was in the architecture program, and she sort of casually mentioned to me that I should look into a program that was offered through the architecture faculty called iconography. And I say that she mentioned it casually because if you know anything about the architecture program at the University of Waterloo, iconography is a major pillar of the education. It's not to be taken lightly. It is foundational, and it is weighted as heavily for marks as design studio. Didn't really know that, but I signed up for it anyway because she showed me the book list, and I was like, oh, that's interesting. And that's where I ended up discovering, I thought I was going into science for that expansive experience.
Mm-hmm.
But first year science, first year physics at Waterloo was a giant classroom with 350 people and someone scratching formulas on the blackboard way down in the distance. And that idea that we were discussing heady ideas and expansion of the universe, that wasn't happening in the class, but that was happening in iconography.
Did you know other people at the school when you went?
Of architecture?
Yeah.
No.
Okay.
So I was just putting myself into a very particular environment, very close. I don't think anybody else was taking that course as an elective.
I say this only because, based on what you just said about being immigrants and Guyanese and dropping everything and doing and leaving it all behind to for a potentially better life, but your parents do it together,
Mm-hmm.
right? There's two people there supporting each other.
Mm-hmm.
When you're going as a teenager into a school,
Mm-hmm.
away from your parents,
Mm-hmm.
away from the foundation of what you know,
Mm-hmm.
less than 10 years after you have
Mm-hmm.
arrived,
Mm-hmm.
to go be independent
Mm-hmm.
at something you're not sure of. I also think that there's merit to saying I wasn't sure, to then ultimately say, after doing the iconography elective, maybe I'm going to pursue this now. You did your due diligence,
Mm-hmm.
and you did a gut check.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
To reaffirm that what you were going to go do, not knowing anyone, was the right choice.
Right. It's funny that you point that out because I look back on it and I never really think about it that often, but I really was just kind of out there alone, and that kind of spirit has never really that spirit continued. I didn't have like a high school cohort that went with me. I didn't stay in residence. I did have, my sister also went to Waterloo, so I did have a certain amount of her friendships. But, they say this about immigration. My sister immigrated. She was older than me. They say that when you immigrate, when in your teens, you tend to hang on to your culture more. I didn't see it. Yeah. And I didn't see assimilation as a bad word. I was like, how am I going to navigate this? How am I going to fit in here? How am I going to do this? I just try to figure it out. So when I got to Waterloo, my sister had embedded herself with the Caribbean associations and all of that kind of stuff. I was not in that world at all. So even though I had a fairly soft landing because she made introductions for me, I didn't partake. So I just went and found my own. And I had no one from high school. I wasn't in residence. I didn't.
Yeah.
I just kind of found my way, and I would find friends in on like-minded people and formed very strong relationships. Both with quasi outsiders in both the science group and in the iconography group. I ended up becoming very, very good friends with a woman who was in architecture but was not that interested in it and was on her way out even after first year.
Right.
And she and I, Rochelle Bissett, became fast friends and hung out in the corner of the classroom. And meanwhile, I was really, really enjoying iconography and getting to know the cultural aspects of architecture. And that's where I fell in love with it. Yeah. And reapplied and got in and spent 7 years or whatever in architecture.
So the brief comment that I made to you before we started recording about finding your way, where you were, as I described this, I'll just describe it for the purposes of those listening. We record this in a studio in my backyard. It's not very big. Carol's kind of sandwiched between a bonsai tree and an open shelf that is somewhat dominant and overwhelming from where you're sitting if you look to the right. Anyhow, I get a coffee made, and she's looking for her placement of where to put the coffee, and by yourself. I say this in third person, but by yourself, you figure out where to put it. And I said to you, I appreciate this, that you're able to do that. And I mean, look, who the hell am I? I don't know if you even need to hear any of this, but I'm saying it only because, as you just described your history, the minutia of that small little task is now a lot more clear to me, and how you're able to just figure out your environment and just be at peace with it. Those are small idiosyncrasies of people's personalities.
Yeah, it's interesting you're stitching that together, but it's true. I'll figure it out. Is kind of what I know I can. I always benefit actually my parents, particularly my mom, for instilling in me like the confidence that I could pretty much do anything. Like she just really did.
And but it's but it's also awareness. There are people that can be uncomfortable in certain circumstances, and what I've just arrived, and maybe I'm piecing more together than I should, and I'm stitching more of this together than I should, but it seemed to me like in the times that we've met, you're not often uncomfortable in many scenarios.
Yeah.
I could be wrong, but that's my take.
Yeah. I don't know. I think we're all essentially the same in a way. I think what makes us beautiful as a society is the cultural nuances.
Yeah.
But when it comes to the space we occupy, the things we need to sustain ourselves and our relationship to that nature, we're essentially the same.
Yeah.
And
people, there's thoughtfulness, and there's sometimes there can be a lack of it. I'm just, look, I like to call out things that I see. Moving past that, I apologize. I feel like I was almost like a psychotherapist for a second.
That's all right. I probably need it.
I don't even know why I went there. Speaking of thoughtfulness in our relationship to nature, later in this interview, Carol and I talk at length about the importance of place and sustainability. She shares her experience working on massive low-carbon mass timber projects like Limberlost Place, and how much it means to design structures that are mindful of their environmental impact. That exact philosophy brings me to Aquanta Pools. When you decide to put a pool in your backyard, you want it to feel like a natural oasis, but you also want the construction process to respect your property. That is exactly why Yuri and his team at Aquanta Pools deliver a premier installation process of biodesign pools. And yes, it is entirely true that this process is much friendlier to the earth. Biodesign completely eliminates the need for heavy poured concrete, which means the excavation is far less invasive and the carbon footprint is significantly lower. What Yuri installs is a custom sculpted landscape feature that blends seamlessly into your yard. These pools last for years. They require almost no maintenance, and the team can outfit them with absolutely any filtration system you are looking for. Whether you want salt water, ozone, bromine, or traditional chlorine, they can do it all. They even design and install custom swim spas. Ultimately, it is about the functionality and the brilliant simplicity of the installation. If you want an eco friendly oasis in your backyard, email me. It's Jonathan, Jonathan, at issued4construction.ca, or head over to the liner notes to learn about Yuri and his team by clicking on the link there. Now, back to Carol. But nonetheless, okay, so let's talk about that then. So we're at the stage now where you reapply to University of Waterloo Architecture School,
Mm-hmm.
and where you asked the same question again.
Oh, was I interested? No, at that point I wanted it so badly. I knew that this was what I was going to do.
Okay.
I think it was a great fun interview. I was interviewed by one of the professors that I had never had a chance to meet there, Fred Thompson,
Yep.
who had spent a lot of time in Japan, interestingly, and I think he and I had a good conversation about an author. I had a lot of angsty paintings now that I look back at them, that I had brought to the interview as sort of my portfolio.
Mm-hmm.
I had done a series of paintings that I would consider to be masks. They were kind of abstracted faces, but they were essentially masks. And I thought that there was an interesting conversation about that. And yeah, I mean, when I got accepted, I was over the moon. I was also struggling to maintain my interest in my science courses, which I had to get through because I had to hit the grade points in order to get through. But I got there, and yeah, I mean, the journey at Waterloo was incredible, life altering, a wonderful, wonderful education. And we discussed this before when we did the recording at Waterloo.
Mm-hmm.
I really think that the education at Waterloo is very grounded in its structure. One of the founders of the school was a poet, so hence the recognition that cultural history is a really, really important part of when you're creating the built environment or aspiring to do that. The understanding of cultural needs is huge, and history and continuity, or when you rupture continuity, and literature does that very well. So does film.
Mm-hmm.
It gives you a fast track into understanding the assemblage of a cultural identity, and when that gets ruptured, either by philosophical changes or acts of violence or whatever. And I think that that's why the iconography course was so good. Through literature and film, it gives you that condensed idea of how a society expresses itself, and that translates to the built environment. And then of course, there's design studio and co-op at the University of Waterloo.
Mm-hmm.
Co-op is huge for grounding you,
Yes.
while studio is huge for allowing you the freedom to dream expansively.
So where did you end up exploring? Did you travel for your?
Oh, always, yeah.
Yeah. So tell us about that.
Yeah, I mean, I worked in Vancouver.
Yeah.
I mean, I started working through the co-op program. Actually, not through the co-op program, but just finding a job at a firm in the beaches, and a very, very small firm. There was 4 of us in the upstairs attic of. It was a small practice that did mostly residential work. Thomas More Architects, and there were 2 other Waterloo grads there. One was a grad and one was actually a student. And I was charged with redrawing his houses for publications. And that's when I learned how to really, really work with pen and ink on Mylar, really luxuriate and learn the art of the line drawing and the nuances of line weights. And I really loved it. And he gave me like 4 months to do nothing but, right? And so I really, there's something about that 10,000 hours of doing something. This wasn't quite 10,000 hours, I don't think, but it was a lot of hours of just drawing lines, redrawing plans, and expressing in line weights what mattered and what didn't. And looking at old James Sterling drawings and things like that for inspiration. The masters of the sort of line weight, and really honing an appreciation for how architectural drawings could speak back to you. And it was a really great experience. But then sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, where were you able to access old sets of drawings from others?
Oh, just in books, just books, and then seeing how they jumped off the page or not. I'd go to the library, I'd go to the reference library, I would go to through other architectural libraries and just look at that. I mean, we used to just look at books.
I say this again only because for those listening that simply go and enter it into ChatGPT, or Gemini, or Claude, or wherever you're going to ask for a set of drawings, or you go into Google and you do your search, you got to appreciate how much different it was when you had to go physically somewhere to go get access to the physical copy.
I often think now, how did we do anything before we had these
archaic
computers in our pockets? I think through the sort of education process and the availability of co-op, I took advantage of traveling right after that. So after working a little bit in Toronto and going back to Waterloo, I applied for and got a job at what was then Busby Bridger Architects in Vancouver. And I don't know if you know much about Peter Busby, but he is an incredible architect. He was sort of called the young lion of architecture in Vancouver at the time. He was bold. He had been educated through the Foster program, and really had a belief in the sort of high-tech assembly of buildings. His partner, Paul Bridger, was the sort of more of the business end of things. And my first job was working at a small little office on Granville Street. And basically, Peter would do work for pizza. He would do freebies for the neighborhood in order to get other sort of trade-offs. At the same time, hustling to do incredibly ambitious projects. He was an early adopter of technology, so had a couple of AutoCAD stations. And at that time as well, there was a woman who was working there who was German, who knew AutoCAD because they were a bit more advanced there. So she had a station there. Turned out that she lived in the Kootenay Valley and would work 10 days in the city and then spend 5 days going back to the Kootenay Valley. So we became friends, and her daughter and her husband lived in the Kootenay Valley. So for part of my work term, I remember asking if I could go on to Uli's schedule, and I would take the bus into the Kootenays with her and hang out in the Kootenays.
What an experience.
I know. I mean, you're there, so you might as well, right? Try it out.
Yeah.
I had classmates there with me at the time, so that's when I became a skier. I was bad at it. When we first came to Canada, my parents signed us up for everything. But, I learned to ski at Earl Bales Park, right? And then there I was in the mountains.
Hold on. We got to explain. You just threw it out there. Like everyone listening, like Earl Bales Park, what's that?
It's a hill.
Let me just explain Earl Bales Park. So Earl Bales, the elevation of Earl Bales might be 300 feet max. Max. There's one chairlift. It's kind of in central, I don't know, I guess northern Toronto, but North York. And if you're learning how to ski, like if you're listening to this and you live in Europe, you would laugh. It's actually worth going. If you're listening to this right now, it's worth going and looking up Earl Bales Park just to get a sense.
That's right. I mean, basically, I couldn't learn how to do linked turns because you couldn't link a turn in Earl Bales.
You
did
do
one.
4 turns and you're down. Yeah, you can straight line it, and not you might not get past like 70 kilometers an hour before you're at the bottom.
Yeah, but living in Vancouver, you could take a bus after work.
Yep.
And do night skiing, and it was fabulous. And I did a couple of work terms with Peter and his office. They were eventually bought by Perkins and Will, and he became a real champion for sustainability. And then I also did a work term there with a very, very, very small office that did custom cottages on the outlying islands of Vancouver, Osborne Clark, and they were incredible. It was a 4-person firm. We had a ton of fun together. We probably went out way too much, and I certainly did at that time. Our end of year Christmas party was, we rented a float plane and hopped around and went to see the projects and saw a number of the projects on the outlying islands and talked to the carpenters who were building these projects. And it was terrific. I built a lot of physical models while I was there, and it was strange to go from this kind of high-tech firm to this other kind of firm that was doing custom hand-built. But I felt I needed that. And a lot of that had to do with the fact that in between those 2 stints in Vancouver, I had spent a stint in Barcelona, and I had studied in Rome. And at a certain point, I knew that if I kept going back to Peter's firm, I would become that architect. And his firm does fabulous work, and certainly I had incredible respect. I didn't know that was my architecture.
Mm-hmm.
So I needed to change. The real work term in Barcelona was the one that was formative. I knew I wanted to go to Barcelona. I wasn't quite sure what I was going to find there. What was interesting was, at the time, a lot of the work that was in the magazines was this sort of Gaudi-inspired interiors by Marsical, who was a graphic designer had done all of the logos and things like that for the Barcelona Olympics, whimsical kind of work. That's what was on the face of what was happening in Barcelona here. But at Toronto City Hall, there was a traveling exhibit of work from the Colegio de Arquitectos in Barcelona, which is like the Architects Institute from Catalonia. And I remember walking through the exhibit and picking up some free literature and realizing there was something else going on here. There was kind of a neo-minimalism, a conviction to the spare but assertive use of materiality. And I was really compelled by that. And they also gave out like a directory of all of the architects in Barcelona. And so I went and
there you go again.
Yeah, there I went again. I went, used a payphone, went through with my broken Spanish, and just asked if anybody would talk to at that time, 4th-year student from Waterloo, and would you give me a job? And I ended up landing a great job, and spent 8 months in Barcelona, and it was absolutely incredible. at the time they were 15 years out from Franco, and the Catalonian community was oppressed under Franco as a distinct kind of culture, and they were really asserting themselves, and it was just the community of architects there. They had incredible lectures at the Colegio. I remember seeing a young and emerging firm called Herzog and Zimiron lecture on some paper architecture. I don't think they had much built at that time. This was like 1990. And I remember sitting next to Jacques Herzog at a subsequent lecture and just chatting with him, and just having your mind kind of blown at every corner, and just the confidence of this minimal architecture that was heavily influenced by Helio Pignon and Alberto Villaplana as educators in the city and practicing architects, was just incredible. And so when I went on to study in Rome, I absolutely knew that this was something I needed to do.
What were you working on at the practice?
For
those 8 months?
There were two major projects I worked on them. There was a interesting house on a hill that was for two brothers that we called the House Hermanos, brothers, and there was this idea of creating just a very slight distinction between the two parts of the house. It was like a whole house that had a little slight seismic shift in it, and I thought that was as close to sculpture as you could get. And then the other piece that I worked on was actually an exhibit that was for a display that was happening at in the convention center there, that was about architectural renovations all through Europe.
Okay.
And so basically, again, it was a very minimal piece. It was a wall that was made out of light. And now that I'm saying that, I realize that the Multi-Faith Center at the University of Toronto is a room that is composed entirely out of light. That's my first project that I worked on at Moriyama Teshima. But yeah, I guess there's some continuity.
This is what happens, by the way, when I speak to people here. They start piecing together things from their life that they never really realized connected.
Yeah. It's hard to talk about yourself. I'm just talking now.
Yeah. But I mean, you're talking about lived experiences that have led to a career, and your formula. I mean, it's the formulation of who you are as a person and what you deliver.
Right.
I'm thoroughly enjoying it. I find it so interesting. You're talking about completely different climates from the beginning. You're in a country on the ocean, to inland, to a small town, to the west coast of Canada, which is completely different ocean setting than what you previously experienced. No more tropical ocean. To now going to Rome, and it's a completely different experience there.
Oh yeah. I mean, I think travel is a huge thing as an architect, to just see and to see firsthand as well all those academic things that I had learned, which was how culture,
yes,
and cultural identity is manifest in space, and how transformation happens. What was happening in Barcelona at the time when I was there was in the Barrio Gótico, which is the medieval heart of the city. There was kind of like a strategic sort of plucking out of buildings in order to create public space. I also gained a huge appreciation for public space, being in such a dense environment, which was only amplified when I got to Rome, where public space bleeds into buildings and then back out onto the street, and just the notion of what is threshold becomes somewhat dissolved. I think the other part of what was happening in Barcelona for me, because I'm not speaking very much about my education at the University of Waterloo, but at the time, the sort of paper architects were de rigueur. We had Liebeskind, and Rem Koolhaas was writing Delirious New York, and Zaha Hadid, and Peter Eisenman, and these were radical ideas about representation of architecture. They weren't building a lot. They weren't building a lot, but they were.
Jean Nouvel at that time too? Or no?
Yes, I would say, but I would also say that we were really enamored with the group that was doing a ton of theoretical writing, or just Zaha Hadid's paintings were just so influential, but they weren't particularly spatial, shards of color across a paper, almost cubist. But then to get to Barcelona and to land in a place where I kind of was affirmed for was what something that I always believed to be true, which is that the materials matter and that space mattered. And circling back to my history as a young person who loved modern dance, which is actually the exploration of space with your body, and also the creation and the making aware of space through observed movement. And then to land in a place like Barcelona, where people like Enrique Miralles were making these organic and dynamic forms, but with corten steel and like real physical material, and actually that affirmation that physical space and material mattered. And then being introduced to the Swiss school architects like Jacques Herzog and Pierre Demerara, and who were educated in like an affirmation of space. Zumthor doesn't come from nowhere. Peter Zumthor's work is from that Swiss school as well, that talks about mass and carving and space and material presence. And so that's where it really sort of coalesced for me, that this is where I lived. I lived in the world of phenomenology, of like your body in space and material, and your connection to nature, and how these buildings become a vessel for social interaction, but also personal interaction with just space and place.
Well, I mean, look, you talked about the influence of having those people in their writing and what they were creating. It also very much correlates to your interest in literature prior, right? Like, there's this strong distinction of the value and the merit of what that is.
Yeah, but I would say what was interesting is that was very influential for my entire cohort in university. But for me, it shifted to the physical experience after the Barcelona experience. Right. And I would say that that's when I actually felt most free as a designer at that point, is to in a way step away from the more philosophical piece, just absorb that into my general understanding of what matters, but to trust physical space, material presence, and scale. Like this, like, what's a comfortable space to speak in? If we were 5 feet further apart, this wouldn't work. You know what I mean?
I know very well what you mean.
These things matter.
Before you arrived, I set the chair to be on a slight angle, both of us, so that it wouldn't be also, so that we weren't turning our necks,
right?
As much. I readjusted. All of these things matter.
And I think these things seem fundamental and maybe even a little bit pedestrian ideas, but I think in a time when we're continuously detached from our bodies, because we are increasingly connected by virtual means, to trust space, scale, distance.
Yes.
When everything becomes, in a way, consumptive, like, is a big window always necessary, or is a small window better sometimes? Do you have greater or less appreciation of a view when it is framed, or when it is just available all the time? And so there's no single answer. It's contextual and it's narrative based and it's choreography. But to circle back to my experience, I think that experience in Barcelona is when I began to trust that.
So what did that look like post Barcelona?
Yeah, so post Barcelona was when I went back to the West Coast and then worked for this small firm that like worked with carpenters all the time. And then I took all those experiences back and did my thesis and then graduated into the pit of the 1992 recession. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then did what I do. I left again and I went to Hong Kong and worked there for 2.5 years. Yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And how did this end up affecting or not affecting relationship with your parents? Like, were they happy that you were going and getting these experiences, or do they feel like there was a disconnect now because you were?
Oh, with my family?
Yeah.
No, I think I was kind of particular. I think certainly my dad, who was such a sweet and tender person, would have loved if the family was always together.
Yeah.
But appreciated what I was doing. I certainly think that my mom thought that I was living her dreams. Yeah, I think
you were fulfilling what they were hoping that you'd be able to accomplish by coming here.
Yeah. No, I firmly believe that if my mom had the power, she would make the world right. She was deeply thoughtful and opinionated, and she'd get on the phone with her friends, and sure, they'd start with gossip, but they'd end up with politics, and like by the time they hung up the phone, they'd figured everything out. So she was big, expensive, and interested, and so I think what I was doing was great. I think she really supported that, and yeah.
So when you were living in Hong Kong, and I don't want to stay too long on this because I do want to get to
now,
yeah. But my curiosity is, and I guess it can also correlate to the other places that you've lived. How did you ever establish what neighborhood you were going to want to live in? And how did you establish if you were going to live with someone or you're going to live on your own? How did you figure that out?
Oh, well, you mean all the times I go around? I
guess let's go with Hong Kong.
Oh yeah, well, Hong Kong was an adventure. So yeah, I mean, when I traveled to Barcelona, I certainly traveled with classmates and all of that. But when I got to Hong Kong, it was really just the opportunity that was available. When I graduated in the recession, because I'd spent so much time traveling around, I really didn't know anybody here anymore. I had tons of student debt, needed to work. And I remember picking up the phone and calling Don Schmidt, not because I knew him at all, but because I figured this is a really big established firm, and I just want to know their thoughts on what's happening in Toronto.
Mm-hmm.
I went down. I didn't have a portfolio or anything. I just said, what's your advice? And he said, you should leave Toronto. There's no work. There's nothing here. And he introduced me to a Chinese architecture firm that he had been, or the firm had been looking at doing some work with. And similarly had a conversation, no portfolio. By the time I got home, on the answering machine, there was an offer to say, if you want to come, I'll give you a job in Hong Kong. So I just went. At the time, I thought somehow this firm would maybe set up some accommodation for me, but they didn't. We were in an expensive hotel that I was thinking this can only last for like a night because I'm already in debt.
They're not paying me enough to be able to.
I can't do this. Yeah. I can't do this. I did stop in Vancouver on the way there and talk to Peter Busby, who had worked in Hong Kong at Foster when they were doing the big Foster Tower in Hong Kong, and just got some advice and realized through talking to him that I had accepted a salary that was way too low for the cost of living in Hong Kong, but whatever. And so
I'll eat uncooked rice. Don't worry, I'll figure this out.
That's it. 2 nights into my stay in Hong Kong, I went to a fairly notorious kind of hotel in Kowloon called Chunkin Mansions, which, like, I'm sure there's a lot of illegals in that building. I rented a tiny room that was like big enough for just a bed and nothing. Stayed there for a while, and through a series of other contacts, and there were 1 or 2 other classmates who had similarly decided to go out into Hong Kong as well. I got a lead on an apartment that I ended up living in a very Chinese part of town. And when I say that, I mean there had been these new expat communities that were being created in Hong Kong. One called Discovery Bay, and these new communities that were sort of set up for expats. I just went to an older neighborhood in an older building. It's like sort of 200 square feet gross, with a little sleeping loft, and somehow managed to buy myself a fridge and get it upstairs, and lived there by myself. And eventually my now husband came and met me there, and we went from dating to living together in 200 square feet. I think it was about probably 7 or 8 months into my stay there.
And had you been dating prior to?
We were just dating.
Okay.
Like, we had not a really solid relationship.
And he was in Toronto?
He was in Toronto, and then he was in Vancouver, and then he was traveling to see his brother get married in Australia, and we had been writing. So this is like a correspondence romance. We got to love each other through letters.
Isn't it powerful, like, when you got the mail and it was addressed to you from him, and you had that anticipation?
Oh yeah.
Of opening the letter.
Yeah. No, it was very. It seems like an ancient thing now, but it was very important.
Yeah.
And just the thoughtfulness of actually writing pages and pages and pages, and yeah, I think we both had the same kind of different, but this particular envelope would show up, and then it was the anticipation was wonderful. Mm-hmm. But yeah, so I would have just lived by myself, but then that changed. And about a year into our stay in Hong Kong, we moved to an outlying island called Chung Chau, a 4,000-year-old island, no cars on the island, and lived our second half together there in a house with a garden, which was crazy for Hong Kong.
There you go.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And just for clarity,
mm-hmm.
Your husband does what?
Oh, he's an architect.
Yeah, just making sure.
And he's
I knew this.
He's a partner at Diamond and Schmidt Architects. Yeah.
Just wanted to make things go full circle.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, so you live on this outlying island for another year and a half, and what brings you back? What brought you back to Toronto?
Well, I think it was time. It was time. My mother had a bout with cancer. I had managed to return once to see her over that time, and we had lived in Hong Kong long enough to know and see that it could just keep going forever. There were people we knew who lived in Chung Chau, and they had been there for like 12 years and still hadn't bothered to get a proper coffee machine, right? Because you're always leaving. Like, there's this mentality that you're not only there temporarily. And yet we had other friends, German friends, who'd adopted children. So we were thinking, this is what happens here. Like, the trajectory of what you can be in a place like Hong Kong at that time was kind of a wide open opportunity. And you could have either comfortably settled into this idea that you're always going back home,
yep.
But it sneaks up on you, and next thing you know, it's 12 years, or you commit. And you like all these other people, made really serious careers there and stay there for years and years. We also knew and know of great friends of ours who the natural trajectory from Hong Kong was to go to a place like New York City, right? And we had a much more significant, I think, longing for home and commitment that we would always return back.
Right.
And partially that has to do with family. So we made our way back to Toronto after some fairly major travel that took us to Japan, Indonesia, and then returned home via Egypt and Israel, and then yeah,
What a trip.
yeah, and then landed.
Sorry,
Mhm,
I'm
mhm.
interrupting again. I'm just thinking about like the temples you'd see
Uh-huh.
and the architecture you'd see in Southeast Asia,
Mhm,
and then going to different Asia and the Middle East
mhm.
and seeing that, and it's like they're not the same.
Nope. I think we actually, and again, to circle back to ICO, I think we actually felt that we needed the cultural regrounding as we kind of headed back to Canada, in that sort of, for better or worse, our society is based in Western culture and the Judeo-Christian myth, and we also thought we needed to be regrounded in that somehow. It was huge though. Like the disconnect was something we underestimated.
Yeah.
So like flying from Yogyakarta to Cairo was a shock. It was bodily. If for nothing else, you mentioned earlier, getting the sniffles coming back to Canada, going from lush and moist to dry and scathing heat. We were there in July. We were in Cairo in July. It was crazy.
It's not humid either, right?
Not at all. Not
It's
at
all
all.
dry,
Yeah,
just dry, hot.
dry, hot, and but we were open to the unexpected. We were completely open to the unexpected. We didn't expect to be snorkeling in Sharm el Sheikh. Um, we didn't expect to go from Cairo straight to Jerusalem, but we found Cairo too vast. My husband's from the prairies, and we were interested in this idea of horizon, but that was almost too much horizon, and we decided to take a bus straight to Jerusalem after only a few days in Cairo, and then to come back more slowly. Spent a lot of time in Jerusalem, but could only see a few things a day, right? Because it's so overwhelming.
Yeah.
And then again, took a bus through the Negev desert, and then into Egypt again through Alat, and yeah, it was incredible life affirming experiences. And then when we came back to Canada, I was we had accumulated skills,
Yep.
because we had been working all through this recession,
Yep.
and Canada was climbing its way out of the recession, and we were able to get work with Hariri Poncherini Architects. Actually, at the time, it was Taylor Hariri Poncherini.
Yes.
And I eventually went on to work at MJMA.
Okay.
Not MJMA at the time, McLennan, Young, Collins, Miller Architects at the time. Before and spent 10 years there before joining MTA.
And so let's go into that and the evolution of your career, Moriyama Teshima. So when you started there, what was the size of the practice?
I think the size of the practice was probably around 30 or 35 people.
Okay.
And we were on Davenport Road.
Yeah.
In an incredible, very, very special building. You knew something was different the minute you came up on it. For anybody out there who had the opportunity to see the old 32 Davenport Road building, it was it was behind a stone wall with a beautiful handcrafted wrought iron fence, and a gorgeous sign that was sort of graphically kind of interesting and cut into wood, that just actually had the address. And then you walked in off of what is now, a very, very Tony part of town, right? It's got all the biggest brands, and all of the stars stay there. At the time, Yorkville was a hippie haven when Raymond bought the building, but you would nevertheless come off the street into a courtyard that had a magnolia tree and a tree of heaven. And again, once you walked into the door, there was a koi pond on your right, and the place was filled with old clear cedar. So, actually Douglas fir. So very rich, clear Douglas fir, and you could see into a boardroom that had a kind of beautifully abstracted tapestry hanging on the wall. It was just a very special place. And then as you walked in, it was an old auto body shop, and so it had all of these weird levels that had been adapted.
Mm-hmm.
And so the office always worked in studios, and partially it did so because the building itself was broken up. And
what were the different studios?
well, we were working on projects together, right?
Okay.
So there were just we would move according to the project you were working on.
Okay.
And we also had landscape architecture in the firm at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just, Raymond had founded the firm with what would be normal now. But when the firm was founded, it wasn't normal. There was landscape, there was interior design, there was a writer on staff. Two Japanese Canadians had founded, one Japanese Canadian had founded the firm, joined with a second Japanese Canadian. Our chief accountant was Jamaican. Female interior designer who was also Japanese. It seems normal now, but back then it was a radical idea of inclusion and integrated practice.
And what were the projects like that you were working on at the early stages of your career there?
Yeah, well, the first project that I was working on was the revitalization of the Toronto Reference Library, which ended up being like a 15-year project that I was less and less involved in. But I remember it being a curious thing because I'd just come from doing, rec centers and whole buildings at MJM, and here I was designing small experiences and furniture at the level of furniture, and I didn't understand the limits of where I was going to be there, or it was just kind of foreign in a way. And then a small project came into the office. That was for the Multi-Faith Center at the University of Toronto. So I think I joined in 2005 or 2006. And then this little project, which was really, it was a $1.4 million budget. It was one of the smallest projects in the office.
Crazy.
And one of the smallest projects in terms of scale as well. But ambition was enormous. I mean, I think the words world peace were actually in the job description. It was post 9/11, and this was a space that was meant for any faith group to worship in. And I think the grace of that idea was captivating, and also the opportunity to work with a wonderful visionary client, Susan Adario, who was the director of student affairs. So all of this came through the recognition that students, faculty, staff didn't necessarily live their faith at the university door.
Right.
So even though a university is a secular institution, the dignity of worship should still have a place.
Yep.
And so the majority of the team were agnostic or not practicing, but the absolute grace of this idea, particularly in the post 9/11 landscape, was captivating.
Mm-hmm.
And so that small project became huge. It won many awards, and it was published in the Globe and Mail to Canadian Architect, and in 2007, which is just when the building was complete, a 45-year-old firm was given the distinction of being on the 20 plus change list, which is a distinction that was meant to recognize emerging architects. But I think that the idea was that you could emerge from within a practice. And the Multi-Faith Center and perhaps myself were the ones who kind of got that recognition. Yeah.
And it was the first time that it happened?
Well, the 20 Plus Change program was the brainchild of, I think, Heather Doubledam and a number of others who thought that younger practices needed a forum to be recognized.
Yeah.
It was not designed to honor a place like Moriyama Teshima.
Well, I mean, that's what I was alluding to. Was it the first time that had happened to a practice that had been established for a long time?
It was the first time that distinction was given out. That it was the inaugural year of the 20 Plus Change program.
Oh, wow.
And it was not the intention, I don't ever believe, to have Moriyama Teshima there, but because I think because of that project. And I think that's a great lesson. And it's where we are now. The firm just this year won the RAIC Practice Award. And we applied this year because of exactly that. We thought this is a message about regeneration.
Mm-hmm.
This is a message about not resting on your laurels, but actually using your firm's legacy to continue to push.
Yes.
For innovation and change and beauty.
Yep.
Yeah.
So at what stage do you become partner? How many years had you been there?
I became a partner, I think, in 2017.
Okay.
Yeah.
So 9 years into your tenure there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I was made a principal first.
No, 9 years, 10 years, somewhere around that.
It's like 9 years. Yeah.
Yeah.
I was made a principal first, and in our office, that distinction just means ownership or not.
Yeah.
And it allows you to try on leadership, and which I think is still important.
Yep.
To have the opportunity to try on some leadership before deciding that this is what you want to do. And so, yeah, I mean, I guess just a few years into leadership was the pandemic, and right around then as well was the international competition for Limberlost Place. So yeah, I mean, it's hard to believe, but it was just kind of right after I became a partner that whole career changing, in a way, opportunity came up. Yeah.
So let's talk about the concept of moving from what had been some of the designs in the past to the idea of going at wood frame, stick frame construction, whether it's mass timber or not, but and then sustainable products and what those look like. Because I know that's been a large focus of the business over the last couple of years.
And my passion too.
Yeah. So talk about how that evolved. Was it ever at the forefront of the business prior to your joining it?
Yeah, I would say yes. And I would say, though, it didn't have the stickers and the names and the certifications associated with it. Right. I would think that people and planet were always integral to the formation of Moriyama Teshima Architects. And if we go all the way back to the beginning of our conversation and talk about the Ontario Science Centre, connecting us to nature is fundamental and integral to our process and our practice. It wasn't called sustainability. It wasn't called any of that. Having a landscape architect in the firm meant that every single project began with doing a mile-high view of a site.
Yes.
We had working with us an incredible landscape architect who was there from the very, very early days of the practice. His name's George Stockton. George would set up our projects with us. Like, he would do a deep dive into the paleo history of a site. We would understand how glaciers retreated and formed scarification on the landscape. Okay. We would understand what the ground was. We would understand what grew here and who came here and why. So from the geology to the anthropology, there's always been this effort in our process, and this process of actually walking the site to see what we see and what we feel We don't usually start with the program. We usually start with the place, and the place
Yeah, let's go.
includes the community.
Yeah, let's go see it, understand what it looks like,
Right.
where it's placed.
Right.
Yeah.
And so connection to place and always has in its foundation a respect. And so I would say, what is sustainability? And what is the sustainability movement? It's a respect for what we have and how to care for it. It's stewardship. And so I would say that was always fundamental to our
Right.
work. Always.
And ownership too. I mean, I say ownership in the fact that, like, when you're making a decision on a material or the potential impact of what a site could look like if you're going to place a structure on it, there's ownership of what decisions you're going to make.
Mm-hmm.
So walk, if you can, I guess, in an abbreviated version of walk us through Limberlost.
Oh, right.
And how that came to be.
Right. Yeah. So, in my personal arc of understanding architecture and space, I allude to the fact that materials really matter. And then comes the awareness that the materials we choose are destroying the planet if we don't choose them carefully.
Mm-hmm.
And then comes the idea that we should be focusing on things that can renew themselves.
Yep.
And Limberlost Place really starts with a client that has like a really big vision. So I guess it was about 2018 or something like that. The competition, international design competition for a net zero, tall, low carbon, meaning made of carbon sequestering materials, i.e. wood, building for 3,400 students on the waterfront of Toronto comes to being. And we had some early conversations with a firm in Vancouver called Acton Austri Architects, who they called us and said, have you heard of this competition? And they had been the architects of a mass timber residence at UBC, a really groundbreaking project. It was 18 stories tall. A lot of the wood had to be covered, but nevertheless, ambitious project that really kind of set a benchmark. And we applied for the competition. We were shortlisted in the competition. 4 teams competed. Our design together won. We worked with fabulous engineers, fire engineers, code engineers, and of course, structural engineers. We won this, and then we realized we have to build this. It stands right now as a paradigm shifting project. It may be one of, if not the first, building of its kind that satisfies all of those things. It's tall. It's got exposed timber. In the projects that of this scale and size, 10 stories, 3,400 students, teaching classrooms all the way from the ground to the top. These buildings fall into the non-combustible part of the code.
Yeah.
So you can't build with wood. So how do you bring these combustible materials into this typology safely? It's through innovation, it's through negotiation, it's through tenacity, and it's through commitment. So it took us probably about 6 years. No, maybe not 6, maybe 5 years to get all of the sort of permitting and the details and to navigate through it.
Right.
There were times when we weren't even sure this project was going to happen because it was so groundbreaking.
Right.
It uses a natural.
Canceled.
Right. Will it get canceled? It uses a natural ventilation system.
Yeah.
Which is a huge piece. I mean, this building has an off mode. You can turn everything off in this building, and it can work passively. And it's engineered and designed to do so. And so this building has been just so much fun, actually. So much anxiety early on. Weren't sure.
I heard that you gave amazing tours. of it.
Yeah, we gave close to 500 tours of the building. We still do them.
Yeah.
I think I'm giving a tour in 2 days to another university that's thinking of doing a mass timber building. And we do that because we want the other buildings like this to succeed.
Yes.
So it's warts and all. We tell people, don't do this in your building. We tell people, try this in your building.
Right.
If you're there. And it will be eclipsed. There's going to be bigger and more ambitious projects.
It's okay.
But for now,
set the foundation.
Yeah, for now it is the foundational paradigm shifting project. It is so remarkably ambitious in terms of its sustainability and its use of timber at this scale and volume that it has pushed the needle.
Right.
And changed expectations of what public buildings are like.
So tell me, as you say this, how many people work at the practice now?
How many people work at the practice now? We're hovering at about 70. It kind of grows and shrinks a little. So
double what it was when you started.
Certainly, but also I would say we still really function like a family practice. Yeah. We work in studios. We work on projects.
I got that sense when I came to see Brian last year.
Mm-hmm.
Last year? No, it was more than that. It was almost 2 years ago.
I don't know.
Right?
Maybe 2 years.
The notice.
2 years ago.
The notice for Science Center was 2 years ago.
Yeah.
It's crazy. I cannot believe how much time has traveled.
Mm-hmm.
Time has passed. Okay, so what do you see now, Carol, with your partners? What does the future of Moriyama Teshima look like? What in terms of scales of project, interests in projects, locations?
Mm-hmm.
What is it that you want? If you could have your ideals, what would they look like?
Right. So if I could have my ideals, I would say that right now, and for the foreseeable future, we really want to explore more fulsomely how we work at this edge of really trying to create balance with our buildings. And so that is to continue to work as a kind of timber first firm, and to do so not because we're dogmatic about it, but because there is no other material for structure right now that can sequester or keep the carbon profile of our buildings down.
Right.
And the structure is it's the skeleton of the building. It's got to be there. And if we can make it work, we want to make it work in a low carbon way. We are gunning for the hempcrete, and we're loving the idea that all of those other materials will decarbonize. But right now, we know we need urgent action. Mm-hmm. So we are really, really wanting to play a role in that. So we are advocating for this material to at least run it down in conceptual design for the majority of our buildings. Our projects and our current locations are in Toronto and Ottawa. We would love to see a couple of other brick and mortar locations in the cities we're building in. And again, this is partially to keep our carbon down. I've just come off of flying from Ottawa to New York to Vancouver in the space of 2 weeks. My carbon footprint right now is atrocious, right? If there is a way for us to have more locations and have more places in the cities we build in, that would be terrific. I would say that the kind of work that we want to support are solutions-based, community-defining projects. We want to get into the housing solution in a more fulsome way. Right now, we have exposure into that. We're the architects for the new Create TO Ossington and Dundas project. We're working with Montgomery Sizem on that. We will team to make it work. We don't want our office to grow in scale to the point where we don't know everybody's names or their kids' names or their pets' names. We think that's important.
Yep.
And certainly we recognize that in timber there are two avenues. Mm-hmm. There's the bespoke solutions that we we want to look at for our cultural institutions, and to continue to push innovation, to continue to push what those forms look like and what those buildings do, and how we, like Limberlost, use those bigger cultural and more significant projects to actually try to push um, where we can take the expression and the industry, and push the form and shape and space of architecture, not gratuitously, but to actually create meaningful, inspiring environments that live in the memories, that sear themselves into our memories. But we also recognize the potential for architecture through timber to be a kit of parts.
Right.
And we understand that those are two branches of the exploration, and we want to play in both, because we think the kit of parts can become monotonous if we don't have careful architectural attention to it. So we are developing a kit for a residential deployment now, to integrate social spaces into higher buildings, and to create variety with a kit. And so we're sort of working in those two avenues. One is a little bit more researchy and kit oriented, and we're looking for like-minded partners on that. And then the other one is to continue to work with our institutional clients to really continue to make special places.
Right.
And we have and are continuing to reinforce a large relationship with the federal government on federal projects. So yeah.
Interesting.
So future's bright. I hope we just need the rest of the world to cooperate.
That's what I asked the question because we don't know who's listening. We don't know if it's someone that's about to want to look at getting a project off the ground conceptually, and who knows? Maybe maybe they're going to reach out. What is it that you do nowadays, and it could be for the last number of years, to be able to defrag and take your mind off of all of it all?
Yeah. Well, every morning I walk a dog. That's something that's really, really grounding. There's something about being around animals that is amazing. It's a lesson in being present. I also think that the dog park is a crazy social condenser. It's there's nothing that you have in common with the people at the dog park other than you love dogs. You find yourself talking to a tremendous cross section of people in that environment. And I think that's super healthy. Getting out and meeting people is something that we really need to understand if we're going to have world peace at any time. We have to see each other as human beings, and that kind of happens there. And then I'm very privileged to be able to look after a piece of land together with my husband and my family in Georgian Bay. It's a completely off-grid cottage on a small piece of rock that you have to get to with a boat, and it's a joy. So
it does not freeze over in the winter, right?
Oh, it totally does.
Oh, it does.
Yes, we've never been out in the winter, although every time we think we're ready to do it, there's like some massive snowfall, and we think, how are we ever going to get across the ice? It's about 5 kilometers or something like that from land. So
that's a lot. I mean,
we would have to ski or something like that in. I'm not sure.
Snowmobile. Electric snowmobiles exist.
Do they?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm not denying the fact that you should ski. I'm just saying, like, if you're going to go schlep all of your stuff with you.
Well, if we go out there, we would. I don't know. I have no idea how it would work. We just put some solar in, so we would have power. But before it was just completely just cabin,
which is, amazing. Fire becomes the centralized part of the excitement in the night. That and a book, right? Or some games. And in terms of things that you want to do for yourself, are there things that you have not yet been able to accomplish, whether it's personally or professionally, that you still want to go out there and achieve? And if so, what do those look like? If not, what are some of the other things that you want to go out and try
Mhm.
over the next little while?
Well, certainly I still feel there's much of the world that I haven't seen, and I still do feel that there are places that I'm very curious about in the world. I've had a irrational desire to see Myanmar for as long as I can remember, but every time it sort of comes up, there's some turmoil in the world that tells me that I can't go there. My husband has a Norwegian heritage, and we definitely need to spend some time there.
Yep.
But truly, I've done so much traveling in my life as well. To me, it's about actually just trying to be, to discover the small things and be more dedicatedly present. I mean, I think that's something that I really want to practice.
Yep.
And career wise, I really think part of what I want to do is it has nothing to do with the ambition of the buildings. I mean, I want to have the opportunity to keep making memorable and meaningful places. But I also recognize that it's my responsibility at this point in my career to start passing on knowledge and mentoring. So I am teaching at the University of Toronto Daniel School as a sessional instructor now, and I
Yep.
tremendously enjoy that. And I trust the process. I've never really been strategic about my ambitions. Strategy by definition is that you understand your end goal and then you take strategic steps to get there in a linear way. I've always been trusting of the process, and I've been trusting of my gut. I understand when things feel right and don't feel right for me,
Yep.
and I trust intuition, and it's guided me pretty well.
I would say.
hmm So at this point, I love working in timber. I love working in this low carbon environment. Um, I love the idea of making impactful change for the housing crisis. But at the same time, the spaces and places that literally make me cry are fundamentally about something fully tangible, but at the same time intangible. They're spaces where we allow ourselves to feel the presence of light and air and view and others. And I just would be grateful for more opportunities to make public spaces that can make us grateful for
Yeah.
what we have.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Last thing I want to touch on, you brought it up in the very beginning about the idea of being in the water. I know that one of your favorite things to do is to swim. Open water swimming.
Yeah, I love swimming at the lake. Yeah. Pools are a bit stressful, actually.
Chemicals.
It's the chemicals, and it's just the back and forth.
Yeah. Yeah. Rather than having like a destination, you swim out and you can swim back to something.
Yeah. I mean, I think swimming in a pool is about your body in the water and what it's doing, and pushing it that way. I think swimming in a lake or an ocean is about you connecting with your environment in a really profound way. There's something about watching your hand cut through the water in the early morning in a lake, in a dark lake, and sort of seeing those bubbles of light that come off it. Yeah, it's profound. It's the closest thing to flying I think you can get.
Yeah, the weightlessness. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Carol, I have to say thank you so much. Thanks for taking and carving the time out of your day to do this.
Mm-hmm.
It was such a joy. I appreciate all the stories. I appreciate all your candor.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say most of all, I really enjoy how level you are. So thank you for being you. I've enjoyed getting to know you over the last year.
Well, thank you. You too, Jonathan. And really, this is a real privilege to kind of map back through some of these stories. I mean, I'm in that generation of my life now where I'm doing some reflection for sure. And the opportunity is really, I'm really grateful for the opportunity to sit here and wax on a little bit. But I hope we continue to meet like this.
Yeah, well, we
Yeah.
will.
Yep.
Thanks.
Thank you.